Hello, and I prefer the term eccentric, but yeah, I guess you could say I'm a little nutty. Welcome to Best of the Rest, the show where we take a second look at movies that were poorly received upon release and challenge ourselves to only talk about the things we like and what the movie does well. It's Scream Month, and this week we are talking the 1998 film Urban Legend. My name is Chris Logan, and I am joined, as always, by my co-host. Hang on, let me look in this mirror. Andrew Williams. Andrew Williams. Andrew Williams. You ready for this one, Andrew?
Yeah. The trick is that after you say Andrew Williams in the mirror 3 times, all I do is appear and criticize your enjoyment of Batman v Superman. That's it. That's all I do.
That's the curse.
That's the curse. Yeah. I'm excited to talk about this one a little bit more. We kind of talked about how I Know What You Did Last Summer is like the obvious, like Scream
Right.
clone. Like everybody knows that one. This one I think flies a little bit more under the radar. Even
definitely in the long run, like legacy wise, yeah, it's definitely fallen off a lot more than I Know What You Did Last Summer.
Yeah, like there's nobody's thinking about this movie for the most part, even though I think it's easily deserving of being in that conversation. So I am excited to revisit it and talk about it.
I'm gonna get the positivity going really early here. In my mind, and kind of what we're alluding to here, like the legacy of these two movies, or even just the reception at the time, is like Scream comes out, it's a huge hit. I Know What You Did Last Summer comes out, and people are like, all right, we got a genre here, we got a thing going, young people getting killed, new era of slasher. And then Urban Legend comes out, and people go, well, that's just a ripoff. Like this is just a ripoff of Scream. This is the end, right? And like, I would argue, I would switch those two. But I don't mean to talk negatively about a movie we just covered on this podcast last week. It's not what I'm saying here, but also it is what I'm saying. I enjoy this movie quite a bit, and I think it is it's just deserving of a better legacy, right? I mean, the legacy is that it's just a ripoff, third rate of what was popular at the time, and in a way, it is. I can't deny that, but I think it does it really well. And it gets, when you talk about slashers, it gets funny to be demeaning towards a movie by calling it derivative, because this genre is just so derivative, and like it's full of diminishing returns in its sequels. Like it's part of what we love about it. So it's weird to sort of take that criticism seriously and direct it seriously at a movie, but like I think this rises above most of the mediocre schlock that you see out there. In this,
I think what makes this interesting to me, at least, is there's a hook. Maybe it's not the strongest hook in the world, but just using.
Well, there was a hook, and I Know What You Did Last Summer too.
I know there was a literal hook, and I Know What You Did Last Summer. Chris, shut up. I hate you. I hate you so much. But I think finding kind of an angle, because that's arguably what makes Scream kind of stand out, is that every movie kind of has its thing. It's got a gimmick that kind of fits within this greater picture. And people will be like, oh, gimmicks. I'm like, no, gimmicks work, man. It's why people like wrestling. But and so in this case, we have an angle. Maybe it's not, as strong as Scream's angle, but it's something that you're at least kind of trying to make it fit a little bit more thematically. And I think that helps it a lot. So whereas I Know What You Did Last Summer is kind of playing in some urban legends, but not really kind of going very hard on it.
It's like one specific urban legend.
And trying to more present it just to create the sense of a boogeyman. That's all it really is supposed to be doing. But like you said, calling things derivative is so weird when, like, you could argue that, like, Jason Voorhees is literally just Michael Myers. Like, that's really all he is, especially when he first starts appearing. That's literally all he's doing. And, it's the idea of a slasher, like you said, it's so specific, and it is derivative. It always has been. There's always things that take from it. There's always things that borrow from it. So it's always weird when people are like, oh, but this is the one that goes too far. It's like, is it though? So I agree with you completely, though. I think this does deserve a better legacy than it has, as we just kind of said, I don't think this movie has much of a legacy right now at all. But And this was also kind of interesting because this is a producer named Neil H. Moritz. He produced both the first two I Know What You Did Last Summers, and then produces this and Cruel Intentions. So he was trying to really shepherd that kind of attractive young cast in kind of these slasher / kind of drama films. And this was one of the results. And this one, like you said, it gets lost in the shuffle, but I think it deserves a little bit more than that.
I agree about the hook too, and I the gimmick of the movie, if you will, because I feel, and I'm gonna switch into old man yelling at clouds mode here in a minute, but I feel like, Andrew, we're probably among the last generation, millennials, that grew up telling these stories. I was familiar with a lot of these urban legends before the movie came out. Definitely this movie doesn't the hook for a hand, but like the hook being left on the car handle, or the one that we see in this movie with the boyfriend's feet scraping on the roof, the person in the back seat turning on the headlights. I remember all these things. Like, I remember my parents genuinely discussing the headlights things as like a gang initiation thing, and that was never the case. But like, I say we're among the last generation because I feel like now, if you had a sleepover and something that comes up, you can just Google it and be like, oh, well, Snopes says that's not true, And like, I think because we grew up in an era before that, these stories were still able to get tossed around with no fact checking. And I don't know. I don't think kids know these stories anymore.
It was just a lot easier to lie to us, is really what it was. Feels like a dumb thing to say in 2023 when people repeat stupid misinformation all the time, but
it's a different kind now, arguably more dangerous now, but it's different.
But yeah, just that you didn't have the fact check, you didn't have the double back around and be like, oh that's that didn't exist, and so you had that's what made these urban legends. They were just repeated stories. There's so many. That's arguably what legends were. All legends throughout history, they are just repeated stories passed down through time, and there's obviously changes and modifications that come along the way. One of the ones that, an example I've always really liked is I don't know if you've seen the movie The 13th Warrior with Antonio Banderas. Yeah,
I have not. I am familiar with it.
It is a pseudo version of Beowulf. But kind of transplanted back into kind of more of a Viking Norse area versus, or Scandinavian type setting versus what Beowulf was, which is escaping me at the moment. But the premise of 13th Warrior is it's kind of like, the story of Beowulf started based off of something real at some point and morphs over time into Beowulf fighting these giant monsters. And 13th Warrior is presented as this kind of idea of like, what does a story like that actually start as? What does a myth that turns into a man fighting giant monsters begin as? And I think that's a really, like, so 13th Warrior, it's like, it's not a giant monster, it's just a giant horde all carrying torches that create the appearance of this giant flaming serpent through the fields. It's really just a bunch of dudes. Which, that was the lesson of Scooby-Doo, but, it's something that you can always learn from. That the monster isn't real. It's just a bunch of people in a suit. So, that's what they all are. And so as we get into these kind of urban legends, that was obviously just more stuff of like, okay, these are almost all horror based, almost all more modern sensibilities, the 80s, Satanic Panic era, things like that. That all spurred on a lot of these too, gave them a lot of leeway. And, yeah, I think it's an interesting approach for the film.
It is funny how things spread. In that, okay, so there's this podcast, Unspooled, good movie podcast, check it out. And they, when they covered The Wizard of Oz, they go through the AFI Top 100, and then they've since completed that and moved on to other movies, but they covered The Wizard of Oz. And Amy Nicholson, I think is the co-host name. Mm-hmm. She made a comment that when The Wizard of Oz came out, it was a lot of people's first exposure to a color film And now it's a lot of kids' first exposure to a black and white film. And I was like, oh, that's fun. And I shared that on Reddit at the time. And the post blew up. Like, I literally just took her idea and shared it. And two things happened. One, a lot of people were quick to point out that this is absolutely nonsense. Wizard of Oz was not the first color movie or even anywhere close to it. There was like a decade or close to a decade of color film in some form or another. Like, it's very unlikely this was people's first exposure to a film in color. And the other thing I noticed is a lot of people sharing a story about their grandmother who thought the TV was broken when it switched to when it switched to color, or they're expecting color and it was in black and white, so that the TV was broken, or things of that nature. People didn't know what to make of it. They were confused by it, which makes no sense because it wasn't anybody's introduction to color. But the fact that people are telling it like it's their grandmother, and I saw this same story popping up over and over again, I realized like none of this is probably true. These are probably people that heard this, and I remember hearing similar things in my life, like someone telling me so-and-so's mom, so-and-so, was very confused by Wizard of Oz or this experience or that experience. But none of it is true, but it has become, myth, legend, and to the point where people like think it's, even in their family, their grandma telling the story, and it's not.
It's almost, stick with me if you will, Chris. There's a similar scenario that comes much later in life, would be believing that your childhood memory regarding a genie film from your youth is completely accurate.
It's weird how many times that has come up on this podcast, Andrew.
Because it drives me crazy. I cannot stand people that are like, no, it was starring Sinbad. I remember the cover. I remember this. It's like, no, you don't. You remember none of
that. That one is weird to me because I never experienced it. I remember the Shaq movie, Kazam. Yeah,
Shaq. Yes,
and I remember Sinbad's movies. I remember what's the first guest? First Kid. Yeah. House Guest. I was mixing them together. House Guest, First Kid, Jingle All the Way. I watched his movies. I saw. It never crossed wires in my brain. So I always thought that was a weird one that so many people attached onto. Berenstein Bears. Yeah, that one's weird. That one definitely got me. But not the Genie movie. And that is an oral history on urban legends. Andrew, let's talk about the film of the same name. The movie that was released September 25th of 1998. Made on a budget of $14 million at the box office. It brings in $72.5 million. Pretty good return on that budget. Critically, it is not well received. You could say it's panned by the critics. It holds just a 27% score on Rotten Tomatoes. As we mentioned, Andrew, this movie hasn't had a great revision from audiences. To this day, it holds just a 37% audience score on Rotten Tomatoes. So by and large, the legacy of this movie is that it was one of those late 90s Scream knockoffs. It never really rose above that reputation.
Yeah, very accurate. And like you said, no reevaluations here, no jumping back through and kind of being like, maybe perhaps we treated you too harshly. None of that here.
Until today, because I think we were too harsh on this.
I mean, I don't think I was ever harsh on it, to be fair. But
we as a people, Andrew,
the royal.
Although,
we as a people, the people that's trash.
That's who I speak for. No, I mean, I've probably never in my life said anything negative about this movie because I don't know if I've ever had much conversations about it. But if you asked me before this rewatch, I mean, I hadn't seen this movie probably since the 90s. I think I rented it back in the day. Definitely didn't see it in theaters. If you had asked me about this movie, I would be like, I kind of remember that. That's the Scream knockoff, right? Like that's probably as much as I would describe it. So like I wasn't giving it any greater benefit of the doubt until this rewatch. So, can't fault the people too much. Let's take a look at the creative team. It's written by Silvio Horta. Now, they have a few movies to their name in that filmography, but would later find much success writing for TV, specifically the hit show Ugly Betty, one of the main writers on that show. However, I doing this research was pretty bummed to see that Silvio has passed away, died by suicide at the age of 45 in the year 2020. One of the most tragic things there are, suicide. Hate to see it. R.A.P. to Silvio, but a lot of success in that filmography and their work.
It was actually the series creator of Ugly Betty. That was his idea.
I did not give them enough credit. Yeah, okay.
You did not. Had a couple of other TV shows, only lasted one season, and was even a consultant on a series called P-Valley, which, just for the sake of the title, you can guess what that probably actually stands for.
What is P-Valley, Andrew? What is that referring to?
Anyway, also wrote a movie in 1999 called The Furries. It was a short film co-written by Ryan Murphy of American Horror Story fame.
Is it the male or female P? That's all I want to know.
It's the female.
Okay.
It's about a strip club, folks. But so some relatively limited credits, but some big successes in there. And like you said, a very unfortunate end. But definitely made quite the mark in the time they were here.
The movie is directed by Jamie Blanks. Now, again, a pretty limited filmography. I do think it's interesting. They also have a lot of work as a composer. You know, you see a lot of people do multiple roles behind the camera, from writer to director, little producing, but composer isn't one I see a lot of crossover with usually. So I think it's cool that they've held those two roles in various movies. They also directed the film Valentine in 2001, which is a slasher movie I had completely forgotten about until I looked at that poster, and it's got like the baby face mask on the poster, and I was like, this unlocked this memory I had of this movie. I don't even know if I ever saw it, but I remember that cover so well, and it's one of those things that I don't know, you could have quizzed me on it. I never would have came up with that name, but as soon as I saw that poster, I remembered that movie. Did you see that one, Andrew? Valentine? Do you remember anything about that?
I'm sure Once Upon a Time, but Denise Richards, David Boreanaz, Katherine Heigl.
Katherine Heigl, wow.
That sounds like it was a little bit of a candidate for this month on our show.
Maybe next year.
Yeah, I had forgotten about that
February.
One completely. Maybe February, yes. For all those Valentine's horror films.
We'll do Valentine, My Bloody Valentine 3D. We could fill it up.
We could. You heard it here first, folks. Planning 4 months out. Yeah, apparently it's an interesting path because Jamie had kind of discussed the path to this. So they did a kind of a short film, like a student film called Silent Number, which was kind of just a babysitter at a house during a storm getting a bunch of weird calls, but kind of your typical classic setup. But then apparently he did receive the script for Scream, which at the time was just called Scary Movie, which if you were going to make a parody of Scream, I think that's a great title.
Perfect title.
Has it ever definitely don't make 5 of them, though.
Well, the thing is, I'm trying to think of the last good one. 3 is probably my favorite. But I don't remember if I ever saw 4 or 5. I want to say the quality kind of goes up and down. So maybe you got to make 5 of them to get 3 good ones out of it. That's what I'm saying.
Maybe it's a weird.
Is that why it's called Scary Movie? Because I knew that Scream was the original title Scary Movie, but did the makers of Scary Movie do that intentionally to lampoon it, or is that a coincidence?
I have no idea.
Because it like launches this whole genre of parody by just calling it the genre title for the movie title.
Yeah, superhero movie, things like that. The dark times of parody, as I like to call it. There's definitely some candidates for our show in there, but please don't.
No, we will not be doing genre movie month.
No,
or whatever
we will
you want to
not.
call it.
But either way, Jamie then got the script for I Know What You Did Last Summer, and he literally went out and shot like a trailer, took all the money shots, spent like $3,000 with his friends. But they just hired somebody. Like they literally, like he'd sent them the tape and was like, "Hey, I think I'm good for this." But they just hired Jim Gillespie to do that. And then the producer was kind of like, "We're gonna find you something. Don't worry." And 9 months later, lo and behold, he got Urban Legend based off of that kind of proof of concept for I Know What You Did Last Summer and that student film Silent Number. So quite the path there to get to this movie. And then, like you said, makes a couple of other kind of horror films. And then, like you said, is a composer. Oddly enough, Urban Legend 2 is also directed by a composer, John Ottman, who has done music on a great number of films. And then
that is odd.
He's also an editor too. So like it's very odd that both movies in the first two movies in this series were directed by people also known for composing. But yeah, not a whole lot of credits in the last couple of years. Looking at his filmography, not too much going on, but it looks like maybe a few more composer credits have popped up more so than anything kind of directing. But definitely made his mark when he could.
Andrew, I think it's time that we jump into this movie, specifically all the positives, everything we love about the film, everything it does well. Are you ready to talk some Urban Legend?
Yes.
When kids at Pendleton University start getting killed in the style of popular urban legends, student Natalie Simon attempts to convince her friends and local authorities that there is indeed a pattern to the murders. As the killer gets closer and closer, Natalie and her few surviving friends must uncover the truth before it's too late. That's it. 2 sentences. That's all you need to know. This is a movie that you can look at the poster and you know what the movie's about. You know what you're going to get. I love that about it. Not that that's the only way to do a movie. Sometimes you need the subtlety and layers and twists, but you know what? Sometimes you just want it to be straightforward, and this movie is certainly straightforward.
I can tell you, I know writers who use subtext, and they're all cowards. But yes, for all the Garth Marenghi fans out there, that was a deep cut. But
I can hear him cackling.
All
Andrew.
All one of them. But it's I like it. I mean, especially after we kind of pointed out last week that the plot / concept of I
Know What You Did Last Summer.
I Know What You Did Last Summer.
Title.
Yeah, there's a lot going on in that movie. It is a deeply involved kind of plot with this twists and the turns and the way the villain relates back to them, but also with this other stuff going on. Like it's needlessly complicated. Here we're given something pretty straightforward, easy enough to dive into with little issue.
Well, Andrew, let's dive into it. Before we get to the scenes, though, we're of course going to talk about this cast, starting with a high point, the best casting, best performance of the film, because every episode we recognize one person who goes above and beyond the call of duty, that they actually elevate the quality of the entire film with their performance. We recognize that person by giving them the Mark Strong Award. So, Andrew, kick us off here. Who is getting a Mark Strong Award for Urban Legend?
I think you and I are probably going to align on this one. I think so, but I have to go with Rebecca Gayheart as Brenda Bates.
Yes.
Yes. There's nothing else to say except yes. So I think throughout most of this movie, everybody's doing exactly what they need to be doing. When the reveal happens, and I guess spoilers, folks, when she is revealed as our killer, she turns it into this whole different level that just
100%.
Completely makes the movie. It's the definition of making a movie better. She elevates those scenes. She makes them way more compelling. She's very, very good as the villain here. And a very, very good at also, not seeming too obvious as the solution either. Obviously, that's definitely something that a lot of slashers fell into is it's like, cool. It's the guy. It's exactly who you thought it was. In this one, I really had no idea. And when they reveal her, I was like, oh man, like, and then the way she plays it, it's just fantastic. Chewing every bit of that scenery, making the most of every single second to those scenes. So without question, I'm going Rebecca Gayheart as Brenda Bates, who gets her last name from the other famous slasher killer Bates.
I was about to say that. Like, I didn't put that together watching the movie, but looking at these names, that's got to be intentional, yes?
Yeah, it's absolutely intentional.
Yeah, 100%. And I agree for all the same reasons. I mean, look, hashtag PP, and I've already said enough positives about this movie, and I'm going to say more. I really liked it. But sometimes, Andrew, we watch a movie for the podcast, and we know we're going to pick a favorite scene. We know we got to pick a Mark Strong Award winner. Sometimes it's really easy. It's really obvious. Sometimes there's multiple people fighting for the Mark Strong Award, and sometimes everyone's doing a serviceable job. And I'm watching a movie, and I'm kind of like, yeah, but who's elevating it? Who am I going to give a Mark Strong Award to? And I was kind of feeling that way watching this movie. Like, our lead, we'll talk about it in a minute. I think they do a solid job, but they kind of get locked into a kind of a more serious scream queen type role. Like, I don't know if it's really elevating it. And then when this reveal happens, like, instantly, I'm like, oh, there it is. That's elevating the movie. That's the Mark Strong Award winner. Before that reveal, I had no idea who I would have given it to. But after that, and after those, the final, act of this movie, final 20 minutes or so, just absolutely steals it. A lot of times, whenever you have a slasher movie or any kind of horror movie where someone's revealed to be a killer, they get less fun. They get dark and serious, and the Scream 3, I think, is a good example. Like, he is more fun before the reveal. And after the reveal, it's all about his sadness and his backstory. And, like, it's not an insult to Scream 3. I'm just saying that's kind of the usual way that you go with it. This is, like, one of the few examples I can think of where the character gets more fun after the reveal. After she's revealed as the killer, she is a blast. Like, I wish we got even more of her. And granted, she comes back like multiple times. They do the last scare a few times. She does the cliffhanger with her. Like, they give us a lot of her. But the character becomes better and more fun after being revealed as the killer, which I think is pretty unique. I mean, she leans into it so hard. It genuinely makes the movie. I was trying to say in the beginning of this podcast that I think this particular movie, Urban Legend, is better than its reputation. It's better than your standard run-of-the-mill slasher. And that is almost entirely because of this performance and this reveal and the choices that she makes. That's what elevates this movie, in my opinion.
I agree completely. Like you said, you kind of wish you had more of it. You wish that there was, half a movie of chewing around scenery like this. And, but enjoy what you got. And in this case, it makes, like you said, things tend to just kind of devolve into like, it just turns into kind of a, hashtag PP, but there's plenty of slasher movies where when the big reveal happens, suddenly at that point, it's just a Michael Myers-esque stalking. It's just, I'm tearing through the house looking for you. I'm trying to do this. I'm trying to do this. And you don't always have Busta Rhymes there to offer well-timed Halloween quips. But in this case, like you said, it becomes immensely more fun. It really dials it up. It makes it much more memorable. Like you said, hashtag PP, but like it takes a movie full of perfectly good performances or perfectly fine performances and gives you that very clear standout. Like I said, not to say that other people aren't doing a good job, not that they aren't doing exactly what they need to be doing, but this is a performance that takes what could have been a very kind of flat finale and makes it a lot of fun, makes it really entertaining, and as like you said, the definition of the movie being better for it. So I'm glad we're in agreement on this.
I mentioned the lead of this movie earlier. That is Alicia Witt as Natalie Simon. Definitely our central character. I mean, we got the ensemble cast, as we tend to do in these types of movies, but the movie is centered around her. She has ties to the killer. Ultimately, the killer is after her for a mistake she made in her past. And I think she's doing great. There's only so much you can do, though, when your job is to be terrorized the entire movie. You know, I mean, the whole movie, she's just feels like she's losing her mind. She plays it very well. But she kind of gets locked in that box. It's kind of the nature of the script. But I do like, obviously being able to have the showdown with the killer at the end. At least her and a few of the survivors gets her moment, gets her victory in the end. But it's played well. Natalie Simon is the character's name. Simon is that I'm really looking for references on all these character names now, trying to figure out what they are all inspired by. I don't know about that one, but Alicia doing a good job as our final girl.
Yeah, I think it's a fantastic job. Quite an interesting career for Alicia Witt. Actually starts as a child actress of sorts, appeared in David Lynch's Dune as Paul Atreides' younger sister when she was 9. So getting it early, and then even had a appearance in the season 2 premiere of Twin Peaks in 1990. So getting some of that early David Lynch cred, which, if you're going to get
goes a long way with you. I know that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's no greater way to cut your teeth than trying to act for David Lynch in the 80s. But I think here she does do a great job. Like you said, she's kind of boxed into that final girl spot, but I think she does a really good job. Kind of like you said, she's got to be the central point of focus, and she's got to play off of all these things that are happening. And I think she does a great job.
Jared Leto's in this movie. This is the third time we've had to talk about Jared Leto. #PP. I don't like the guy. I don't like Jared Leto. I'm breaking all of our rules by doing that, but I got to draw the line somewhere. Andrew, damn it, he's fine in this movie. He's a journalist. He's kind of a jerk. Jared Leto's good at being a jerk. He's a big red herring. You think he might be the killer, and then he's not. It's Jared Leto. It's early Jared Leto. Pretty boy Jared Leto. He's in the movie.
Yeah, he's acting really normal, which always kind of weirds me out when he's just in a movie and he's just a dude. I was like, you're not just a dude. I don't believe this for a second. I know who you are. You're not fooling me. But
your hair looks washed and groomed. That's not you.
You're clean shaven. What? How dare you come into my home in 2023 clean shaven? How dare you do this? I have nothing else to say. We're not talking about him any further.
Tara Reid, however, another alum of the show, plays Sasha Thomas. I want to say we talked about Tara Reid multiple times. I know Josie and the Pussycats. Has she come up another time in our show?
That's a great question. Urban Legend. We've not done any of the American Pies. Josie and the Pussycats is fantastic. I don't think so.
Interesting. Okay, I think we talked about her. I like Tara Reid. I think, gosh golly, it's going to sound backhanded, but I think whenever she is cast well, she does a great job. And I just say that because I think she's been miscast a lot in her career, but like she has a lane that she's very good at. And I think she nails it whenever she's cast in the role. And I think her character here being, she got this provocative talk show, kind of has a crappy boyfriend. She's a little crappy sometimes. Like I think she plays all up very, very well. And it's good use of a young Tara Reid.
I agree. I always love when there's like things in these shows where like very clearly, like, that's not how it is in real life. Like, and that her radio show is kind of like that. I was like, there's no way a college would just like casually let somebody have this show on their radio station, having been part.
She's on like random times. She's like, I'm gonna go to the radio station, and just starts taking callers at just whatever she wants.
I guess if you can, you can. But anyway, I do think she's used very well here. She is eventually one of our great many victims in this movie. And that sequence where she gets chased down, you can just, she does a great job at, really portraying how scary it would be to be chased down by somebody with an axe. Which, not a fun thing to experience, I would imagine, but, good stuff.
Michael Rosenbaum plays Parker Riley. This is Tara Reid's character's boyfriend. He's kind of an ass. I mean, this movie doesn't...
Huge, man. Not even kind of. This dude's a prick.
Sometimes it's a big turnoff to me when the entire cast is unlikable in a movie. Like, sometimes, I don't know if it's intentional or not, but like I watch a movie and I'm like, who am I supposed to root for? Like, this isn't enjoyable. This movie has like two characters for sure, maybe three characters, just because I don't like Jared Leto. It's got three characters that I don't like, but there's enough to balance it out that I don't lose the whole thing. But yeah, he's one of the characters that tries to be funny, but he's just abrasive and annoying. But Michael Rosenbaum is really good at that, so I'm not. None of this is to throw shade at him. He does a good job playing this douchey jerk. Which is funny because I also know him from the movie Sorority Boys, which is also like a college campus comedy. I remember liking it back in the day.
I'm sure it's held up flawlessly.
I'm sure
it's just still such a great now as it was then,
and probably has something great to say about gender equality. Yeah, I don't know. I'll probably never revisit it. I'll leave the memories alone. There's this scene in the movie. This is the one thing I remember about the movie, honestly, other than the plot where they dress up as girls, is they talk about like you don't want to end up like so and so, like a past person that went to the school, and then it turns out that person is working as a janitor at the school. It's played by Brian Posehn. And after he says that, like, they just look up at him and he goes, "I've got no regrets." And, his classic Brian Posehn voice. I still quote that with my older brother, like, to this day. Like, that scene, again, it's the only thing I remember about the movie. Very funny. I'll never watch that movie again. But I also know him from the movie Pool Hall Junkies, which was an independent movie that he made alongside another guy whose name I can't remember, even though I was just talking about this before we hit record.
Mars Callahan.
That's him. I remember him from that movie. It's a pretty fun movie if you can find it. It's just they're hustlers in a pool hall and they do a lot of fun like tricks you can play on your friends. A lot of fun like tricky bets kind of thing. It'll make sense if you see the movie. They're hustlers and it's fun to see. And Christopher Walken is in that movie, gives a great, genuinely all-time great Christopher Walken speech. Check it out. Ernie Reyes Jr. is in the movie. Dude, I gotta watch this movie again. I haven't seen this in years, but I used to watch it all the time. It's one of those DVDs I got, I think, from like Blockbuster. Like the 3 for $10 sales they had back in the day.
Yeah.
I used to watch it all the time. But highly recommend Pool Hall Junkies. But Andrew, that's Michael Rosenbaum. What do you think?
I thought you were just about to move on and let me not say anything at all about it. But anyway, yeah, Michael Rosenbaum. I mean, he had that period in the late '90s where, like, people kind of thought he was going to be kind of a big deal. He was in, Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil. He was in this. He was in stuff like Sweet November, like you said, Pool Hall Junkies, Sorority Boys. Kind of felt like they were trying to really build him up as like a Ryan Reynolds-esque type.
I was gonna say, if there's like a Pokemon evolution, it's like Michael Rosenbaum, Dane Cook, Ryan Reynolds. It's in terms of like levels of success playing this obnoxious character.
Yeah, and so I mean, Michael Rosenbaum's been around. He also does a great deal of voice acting work. He was the Flash on Justice League and Justice League Unlimited. He was in almost any DC animated show. He's done so many different things. He was even in a few of the animated movies they did. There's been a few ebbs and flows with him being kind of a leading man. Obviously, Smallville, he was Lex Luthor. He was on that for a great many times. Even got to direct an episode here and there. Had his own show called Impastor for a while, where he was like a fugitive gambling addict who, like, in order to hide from the loan sharks that were after him, stole the identity of a recently deceased gay Lutheran pastor. Your typical comedy setup.
Yeah.
But
shenanigans ensued.
Ensue. And then he even had some brief appearances in the last two Guardians of the Galaxy movies as Martin X, who you may know as the guy with the crystal face. But he usually hangs out with Stallone's crew. But yeah, a varied career. Now he's a pretty big presence on the con circuit now. So if you're looking to meet him, shouldn't be too hard. But yeah, in the late 90s, early 2000s, they were really trying to cast him as that type, and he did a good job at it.
Alum of the show, Joshua Jackson plays Damon Brooks. That's 3 alums of the show in this movie. I'm just realizing. We, of course, talked about him back on our Mighty Ducks episode. Now he's all grown up, and he is also a jerk, Andrew. I did not like any time he opened his mouth. Very gross womanizer type character, gets killed very quickly. But again, that part is played very well by Joshua Jackson. I feel like this is maybe like, child actors, they grow up, become young adults, and they want to like shed that innocent image that they have. I feel like this is maybe one of the roles you take on to be like, I'm not just an innocent kid. I can be a jerk too.
I can be layered.
But yeah, I mean, I hated him, so he did a good job. Good job, Joshua Jackson.
Yeah, obviously Mighty Ducks, probably everybody's first exposure to him, but obviously Dawson's Creek is the thing he was doing at the time. The movie even gets in its little quick Dawson's Creek jab when he turns on his radio, and it blares the Dawson's Creek theme for just a brief second before he turns it off, and it's like,
did not even put that together, Andrew. I thought he was embarrassed that he listens to sappy music when he's alone. I did not even put the connection together.
That was quite literally the Dawson's Creek theme, so they had a little bit of fun with that. All over the place. I liked him a lot on Fringe back in the day, that kind of weird sci-fi show about fringe science with himself, Anna Torv, John Noble, Lance Reddick. Great little cast there. It was a fun little show. Leonard Nimoy, one of his last big live action things outside of Star Trek that he was a part of. Just a really fun show that I liked a lot. Did even on some recent stuff. It was part of that Fatal Attraction reboot miniseries they did. Not really sure why we did that, but anyway, just the exact thing he needs to do here. He's a jerk. Like you said, there's almost every dude in this movie is deeply unlikable. And, they are just not people you're rooting for. That's for sure. They are not people you are looking for success. And I'm not saying I enjoy watching people die, but maybe for more than one of them when they died, I was kind of like, maybe don't be a jerk next time.
That takes care of our main players, our group of young friends that are getting killed. But taking a look at some of the supporting players, we have Loretta Devine as Reese Wilson. She is the security guard on campus, and I think this is a pretty fun performance. Not a lot of screen time. She pops up here and there throughout the movie, but they do such a fun job of setting up, she's part of the big showdown. They set up that she watches like Pam Grier films all day and like models herself after like classic Pam Grier. Says her lines, holds a gun like her and everything. It just adds this fun layer to this character. Her very distinct voice, and I cannot hear her without immediately thinking of the show, The PJs. Andrew, did you watch The PJs back in the day? The Eddie Murphy claymation like show? I loved this show. I think it only lasted like one season. I watched them all. I thought it was great. She plays the mom. And that's always the first thing I think of when I hear her voice. Also, native Houstonian, shout out. Graduated from U of H. Very cool. Loretta Devine.
I don't know if I said this, but I will point out she is the one character that does return for Urban Legend 2. She does come back around.
Technically 2 characters, right? 2
characters. She's in the main crux of the story.
Okay.
She gets to be a part of the proceedings. And so definitely makes some references to what happened before. I'd actually kind of forgotten about that. My mistake. But I mean, looking at her filmography, it's just there's so much stuff here, and it's stuff you've definitely seen. Just a laundry list of television and films. Just a truly tremendous career. And I think she adds a lot to this movie. You kind of point that out. Like, she's a great character. She's competent, which I always appreciate in law enforcement in these movies, where they are actually kind of adept at what's going on and are kind of trying to make smart decisions, which is just so uncommon in these movies. She still ends up on the wrong side of some things, but she's entering into things kind of with the right idea. And she's a security guard that's kind of not really getting the support. Obviously, there's a big storm going on through a lot of this stuff, so she's not able to get back up. But it is a really, really fun performance, and she adds a lot to this movie as well. If there were more screen time here, I think she'd definitely be in the running for the Mark Strong.
We have John Neville as Dean Adams. He's the old Dean, old, I mean like old man, and is just trying to sweep everything under the rug. Of course, this murder was actually a suicide. Don't ask questions. Know that kid wasn't murdered. He's probably just away for the weekend. Really just trying to turn a blind eye to what's going on at his school. And ultimately, pays the price, gets that Achilles tendon cut from a blade from under the car. Yeah, pretty brutal stuff. And then gets run over. I don't know. He's good at playing a grumpy old man.
Yeah, I mean, he's, again, you look at his filmography, just a laundry list of film credits going back all the way to the 60s, probably even before that. A kind of just, he's the kind of guy that you get when your movie needs a little bit of, what do you call that, Chris?
Gravitas.
Wonderful. I also remember him probably as like the lead of Terry Gilliam's The Adventures of Baron Munchausen. That's probably what I mostly associate him with. Of course, if anybody's seen that movie. Eric Idle's in it too, I guess. But yeah, his job here is to be the guy who covered up, wants everything gone, doesn't want anything kind of staining his reputation, doesn't want anything causing some issues, and eventually pays the price for potentially playing a part in a previous cover-up. So,
and then our supporting casting gets really fun here. We have Robert Englund as Professor Wexler, and he gets the special "and" crediting. It goes through all the credits, and then it's "and" Robert Englund. Of course, Robert Englund is most known for playing Freddy Krueger, so it's fun to have him as a supporting character in your slasher movie. And of course, you're going to suspect him as the killer. Pretty obvious red herring, I would say, but you got to do it. You've got Robert Englund there. You've got to imply he's the killer at some point. And Robert Englund's one of my favorite overactors. I mean, it's part of what makes Freddy so much fun. And anytime he shows up anywhere else, like, it's just, he kind of goes above and beyond with it, and it's a good time.
Yeah, I'm never going to be sad to see him in my film. In the film I'm watching. He adds another level of gravitas, but it's also weird again to see him playing a normal person. Generally speaking, he obviously there's a bit of a tragic backstory here, but by and large he's just a professor. So it's always wild when they do that, and he's literally just a normal guy. Even when he was in Stranger Things recently, he had a deeply tragic backstory, had a really unique look, and you were just kind of like, yeah, I get why you got Robert Englund for this. With this one, it's just a fun cameo. Again, meets a very unfortunate end. He is not spared. He is not spared at all from the proceedings of what happens here. And obviously Freddy Krueger is iconic. It's, I do wonder sometimes if he'll get that, get the Jamie Lee Curtis and Halloween moment where he might get one final hurrah as Freddy Krueger. I think it'd be fun. I would certainly like to see it. It's kind of one of those things where there's so many iconic slasher villains, but so few of them were played by the same person the whole time.
Yeah.
So obviously Jamie Lee Curtis has appeared as Laurie Strode several times, but nobody has appeared as Michael Myers that many times. It's under a mask. It's tough to tell. With Jason, the most iconic Jason actor to most people is the guy who plays Jason in some of the supposed quote unquote worst movies of the franchise. Like Kane Hodder has got this tremendous following, but generally speaking, I think he's Jason in 7, 8, 9, and 10, which most people are like, that's the decline. But with Robert Englund, he was there. There's only one Freddy movie he's not in, and it's the reboot. And you wouldn't expect him to be in that. But I hope, and he doesn't need to do it. Like, that's the other thing. New Nightmare is a perfectly fine way for him to cap his time as Freddy Krueger.
Well, as we established in our Nightmare on Elm Street 2 episode, his most recent appearance as the character,
that's right,
is on the sitcom The Goldbergs, which just feels weird, Andrew.
You can't end it there, guys. You cannot do this. It is, anyway, wouldn't mind at all going back for one more with Robert Englund in tow. But we'll see. But anyway, it's fun to see him just playing a normal dude here.
And then lastly, yet another alum of the show, Brad Dourif, plays a character named Michael McDonald, he's the gas attendant. That's all I need to know. He's in the opening scene of this movie and referenced a few times later in the movie. We talked about Brad Dourif back on our Alien Resurrections episode. Maybe he won a Mark Strong award there. I don't remember. I can never remember these things. But as we said back then, like, the dude started his career with one of the greatest American films ever made, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Very memorable performance at the center of that movie. And famously has a stutter in that movie, which is interesting because he's doing it again here. And I wonder if that is a coincidence. But
no, it's not. I guarantee you it's not. I absolutely don't believe it is.
They're like, all right, we have a stuttering character. What's a good character actor that is known for having a good stutter? You think that's how the casting went?
Who also had ties to the horror genre, so that list is pretty short, I would imagine.
That's true. Also, the voice of Chucky in the Child's Play movies. And this opening scene at the gas station, I'm pretty sure you recounted this scene, like, shot for shot, probably back in our Alien Resurrections episode, because we're talking about Brad Dourif. So it's funny that we're covering the movie now, because I know you've walked through this entire scene on the podcast.
And guess what? I'm going to do it again, folks.
It's a good scene. It's fun. But Brad Dourif, I mean, we said it already, Alien Resurrection, just a very good character actor. And his performance in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest is something that, no one can ever take that away from him. So, stellar career.
He also, I would assume, we did Rob Zombie's Halloween, right?
We did. See him that.
So he plays Lee Brackett in Halloween. So I assume we also talked about him there. Pretty sizable main character role there. So yeah, I mean, I do love that scene in particular, just because it shifts the expectations so heavily. I'm sure I talked about him all over the place. That episode, Exorcist 3, he's very good in that as well. Like you said, all of the Child's Play movies and associated television shows too. He has been there for all of it. That is another instance where he has been that character in everything except the reboot. So that's actually 2 guys in this movie who have been largely the only versions of those characters that have existed. Which, it's not a lot, but weird it's happened twice. And he's also, like you said, he just a great career. Like you said, he kicks it off like in the biggest way possible. Was also in David Lynch's Dune as Peter de Vries. All over the place, doing tons of stuff. He was also in The Eyes of Laura Mars, an early film written by John Carpenter that I like. But mentioning Rob Zombie's Halloween, I also do want to point out another brief small role in this film, played by Danielle Harris. She plays our main character's roommate, who really enjoys having sex with her boyfriend, I guess. So much so that she will do it while her roommate is in the room, which I guess respect, but
college, I guess.
I guess, whatever. But anyway, so she does go on to be in the Halloween kind of remakes, but as we talked about on that episode, she is in Halloween 4 and 5 before this, where she plays Jamie Lloyd, the kind of the daughter of Laurie Strode, as it's revealed in those movies. because Jamie Lee Curtis was like, I'm kind of done with this. I don't want to keep doing it for now. She eventually came back around, but she has her own. So another kind of, oddly enough, some slasher cred there, even in some of this other casting. So this movie really did kind of go out of its way to bring in some of those people that had associations with it before.
Good call on that one, Andrew. And now I think it's time we jump into this movie. Specifically, the best parts of the movie and our favorite scenes, starting with the high point. Andrew, kick us off here. In your opinion, when is this movie firing on all cylinders? What is the best scene of Urban Legend?
It's the first scene.
which isn't backhanded. It's just a really good scene.
It's just really good. Obviously, I recounted it very heavily in that episode, but I just love the setup of this. I remember rewatching this movie and kind of not remembering how this scene unfolds. And it just, the way it just zigs and zags all the way through. And I love the payoff. Because then it's like that whole, what is it, situational irony, when we know something the characters don't.
Dramatic irony.
Dramatic irony. Thank you, Chris. But just that idea that like she's so, like the dude walks out of the gas station and it's raining and you immediately are just like, he, as kids say today, gives you the ick.
Do kids say that, Andrew? Is that a thing?
I don't know. I just know it's a thing some people say. But
first I've heard of it. I'm not saying
anyway,
you're wrong, but
you know how hip I am to the kids today, Chris. Yeah. I know all their slang and words. I know all the words.
He didn't have any Riz, you could say.
No Riz. Yeah, absolutely not. Anyway, I do love this scene. I think it perfectly sets up, to a degree, the kind of movie we're going to be watching. A movie that's maybe not going to go the way you think it does. A movie that's going to kind of play on some of those expectations and kind of go in potential unexpected directions. But the way this all builds, the way it pays off, it's almost this mini movie in itself. Like the beginning of this movie is basically a short film that could just be its own movie. Like you literally could have just released that as a short film called Urban Legend, and boom, that would have worked. It would have been absolutely perfect. And it's just like a proof of concept almost. And from the way she pulls up, he comes out of the gas station, you immediately have got the complete lack of Riz, as we've established. But it's the way it builds. Then he's like, there's a problem with the card. And like the whole time you're just like, this dude's not really good. There's something weird here. And then ultimately the reveal that the reason he's trying to get her inside is because there's someone in the car. And like even watching it back, you can see that there's like when he puts the gas in, you can see that he like looks in the back seat or something, and you see his face changes, and he notices, and he's like, oh. And so the lesson here is that if the voice of Chucky is trying to give you a message through a stutter, give him a second. You know, it's going to be okay.
We've all found ourselves in that situation.
We have. While it's raining and we forgot to put gas in our car. And, you know, it happens. It just happens. And it's a situation that you got to be prepared for.
So this movie, does it take place in Oregon?
I think so. Pendleton University,
because she pulls up to the gas station and waits for an attendant, which is very alien to me growing up in Texas.
Yes.
Not in the 1950s or whatever that was commonplace. And I know like Oregon, I think recently actually they changed the law so you can pump your own gas there, but it was like one of the last holdouts for changing that. So
I think New Jersey had it for a long time too, because when I went to Atlantic City with some friends, we like pulled up to the gas station and I was like full on like, give me the car, dude, I'll pump the gas. And my friend was like, we don't do that here. It was like,
he pulled you to the side. He taught you, you know.
He was like, yeah. So yeah, it's that. Yeah, that's definitely a flashback to an older time. But yeah, in Texas, that was, if it was a thing, it hasn't been during my entire life.
Absolutely.
And so I never had that. But yeah, I love this whole scene. I think it sets this movie up perfectly. I think Brad Dourif is perfect for this part. And I will give a shout out to as well Natasha Gregson Wagner, who plays our driver here. This is her only scene in the film. She is, I believe, Natalie's original roommate, or she's somebody else's roommate. I forget who she is. But she's part of that group. And is kind of our first shot in these kills here. And I think it just sets up the movie perfectly. I think it does a fantastic job. I recounted it on that episode. If you really want to hear me talk about it again, it's either the Alien Resurrection or the Halloween episode. I don't remember which one.
Or just watch the movie. Like if you,
or just watch the movie. I don't need to go that deep into it, but it's a great scene and it sets the tone perfectly.
I agree. It's just a perfect opening. It's really good. We've covered the gas station stuff. Like perfect casting with Brad Dourif. You look at him, you think he's gonna be a creeper. You realize he's trying to warn her. Even after he gets hit with her car, he still shouts out to her, trying to help her. He's a good dude, Andrew. And then
he's just trying.
One thing I do love though is before she pulls up to the gas station and after, you get some great car singing. I love anytime you get a character alone in the car singing and they're not singing well, because that's so true to life. We all, we're alone in our car, or we think we're alone in a car. We'll belt out along to the song on the radio. But I'm realizing from your revelation earlier with the Dawson's Creek song on the radio that the radio is constantly breaking the fourth wall in this movie, because the song she's singing along to is Total Eclipse of the Heart, specifically singing the line, "Turn around," over and over again, which she is not actually doing, because if she did, she would see that there is a murderer in the backseat, an axe-wielding murderer that chops her head off, and it's a great... Yeah,
whoa. You're telling me the axe-wielding murderer in the back seat cut her head off?
Clean off, Andrew. Whoa. You talk about this being like a perfect like short film opening, down to the point where we don't see the gruesome, we get the idea, but that shot of the swing starts, then we cut to the exterior of the car, and the axe swings through the window and shatters it, like with some blood. It's good. It's good imagery. It's all you need to see to get the idea. It's a great pick, Andrew. I mean, I knew you'd be picking the scene, obviously, and it's very well deserved. I'm going to highlight a different scene. It's really a toss-up, but for me, I'm going to say my favorite scene is the killer reveal, for the reasons we talked about earlier when we're giving out our Mark Strong Award, because it's the scene that made me go like, whoa, someone's really popping here. This movie's doing something really fun, and they are really going for it. Because as we're getting closer and closer to this reveal, like I going in this movie, I did not remember who the killer was, but I was able to guess it before it's revealed. Kind of process of elimination. The red herrings are kind of obviously red herrings. Who's left? And I was like, oh, it's gonna be her. But I couldn't put together like why. Like the killer's going through this a lot of work to recreate urban legends. Like, why is this happening? And basically the explanation is she's kind of insane. I mean, she's getting revenge for the love of her life, as she says, her boyfriend getting killed by some friends doing a play on an urban legend, doing a prank. So that's like the inspiration for her reenacting these urban legends, but it's still like a large leap to like, I was get my revenge by murdering a bunch of people in these convoluted ways. And why would anybody do that? Because she's eccentric, a little bit nutty, as I repeated in that opening line. But it's great. As I said, you get the killer reveal and it's fun. Like it becomes fun, a little Scream-esque in that way. I'm thinking of Matthew Lillard after his reveal. I mean, he's fun before and after the reveal, but I think a lot of his best lines come after the killer reveal in that movie as well. So maybe there's a little bit of inspiration there for how to treat your young killer. But I love the line about being eccentric. I love Natalie's pleading with her, saying that she needs help. She says, "I've already tried therapy. Obviously, it did me no good." It's great.
Yeah.
And she's got like just a ton of great lines. I love her. She almost does like almost like manipulating Natalie when she pulls a gun on her. She goes, What are you gonna shoot me, Natalie? What kind of friend are you? After she's already murdered all of her friends. It's great. It's such a fun killer, and I mean, I said it earlier talking about the Mark Strong Award. Like, this is what elevates the movie, in my opinion, beyond a standard slasher affair. This and the gimmick, I should say. I do like the idea of killing in the style of urban legends. I think it's really strong foundation for a slasher. But this killer reveal and specifically this performance, I love it so much. So I'm going to highlight that scene as my favorite.
I think this is an absolute pick. This is obviously the runner-up. If it weren't for that intro scene, it would absolutely be this, just because this is where it all comes together. It's where we get the payoffs. And I mean, it's a pretty straightforward motivation at the end of the day. This is just pure revenge. That's all this is. This is like, it's as simple as you wish I Know What You Did Last Summer's plot was. Like, it's all. I
hate trying to beat up a movie. We just. Look, we said plenty of positives, but yes, right. I wish that movie was, you hit me with your car, you think I'm dead, I'm gonna kill you. That would be a lot stronger. I'm sorry.
Basically, yeah, the gist to this here is that Natalie and Michelle caused a road accident, and Brenda's fiance, David, was the victim. And so this is all just her getting back at everybody she saw as being involved with that situation. Just straightforward revenge. It's very,
Isn't that also funny, though? Because it was David Egan at the center of I Know What You Did Last Summer. Now it's David Evans.
Maybe it was the producer just being like, let's try this again. Let's just...
Simple. We got to go back.
What if the killer was just somebody getting revenge? And like, I mean, in I Know What You Did Last Summer, he is just getting revenge, but like the setup of all of that is just so convoluted.
Yeah,
here it's just straightforward, and it's simple. It doesn't need to be anything more than that. Very Friday the 13th, I guess, in that regard, where she's getting revenge for Jason. That's it. That's literally all she's doing. And I'm just got the 4K of the disc. I'm gonna have to give that a rewatch. Given tomorrow is Friday the 13th. When we're recording this, folks, you will be hearing it after. But anyway, I do love this scene. I think it's fantastic. Like you said, the manipulation, the quips, the wittiness, like it very much does have that Matthew Lillard kind of manic energy, which, like you said, is good. Like it's got that's like Freddy Krueger. Freddy Krueger has that manic energy that makes the character so memorable. And I'm not, putting Brenda Bates on the same level as Freddy Krueger or anything, but like it makes the movie more memorable. It makes the scene more memorable. It makes the reveal more memorable. And she's even like not giving up yet. She's going to do one more urban legend kill. She's going to do the kidney removal, the waking up in the bathtub full of ice with the missing kidney, because it's that simple. It's just really well done. I like it a lot. I think it does a great job at kind of bringing this all full circle. We have our final girl and kind of our final dude as well, unfortunately. It's just because it's Jared Leto, folks. Loretta Devine, her character does also survive. She takes some shots here at the end. But like I said, she does get the return for the sequel as well. But I think it's great. I think it's a fantastic ending to this movie. I think it's the exact kind of ending these movies should have. And it makes the movie better. Perfect opening scene, perfect closing scenes. What can you ask for?
Grand opening, grand closing.
Forget the middle. That's all you need.
One thing I do appreciate about this movie, I said earlier, like you look at the poster of this movie. By the way, great poster. I've talked to you about this multiple times since we planned this month. I am kind of obsessed with this poster because when I was getting like our kind of like promotional material ready for this month, I saw that poster and legit I assumed it was maybe not like a Mondo poster, but I thought it was like fan art or a screen print but no, that's the standard poster. The one with the eye in the center and it's like shattered glass on each shard has a different one of our characters. It's so good. I really like that poster. But you look at that poster, you see the name Urban Legend, you see the young cast, like, oh, this is a slasher movie about deaths revolving around urban legends. You can probably guess a few of the urban legends that are going to be referenced or depicted in the movie. And the movie delivers on that entirely. I do like that it's not, like we said, I Know What You Did Last Summer is kind of like one urban legend. this one mixes in a bunch of them, which I think is a lot of fun, trying to figure out which one they're going to do next. There's obviously a lot of ones based around murder, but then there's also, the reference to like Pop Rocks and Coke is thrown in there. Microwaving a dog is thrown in there. To dry out
They do
the
the bloody.
dog.
There's the
Bloody
opening
Mary.
one, obviously the killer in the back seats. The university murder cover up. That's another urban legend that there's always like shady stuff at college campuses that gets covered up.
In real life, it's just rapes they cover up.
Yeah, and
Sorry.
typically involving sports teams. They do the Pop Rocks and the soda thing. I guess somebody sort of dies from it. But it's not
Does
soda.
someone
they use
sort of
there.
die from it? Okay, yeah. The bleach.
Yeah, they do the.
If you eat Pop Rocks and drink bleach, you'll die.
Turns out, who thought? They do the ankle slasher under the car. They do the headlights off thing, where like if you flash your lights at somebody with their headlights off, you become a target. The hanging from the tree. There's a whole bunch of them. The kidney heist I just mentioned. They mentioned that song that has the real murder scream in it. That was another big urban legend. It's
And
another,
the song they reference is "Love Roller Coaster." Is that real about that song specifically?
Yes. It is. Yeah. It is an urban legend regarding the song. I have no idea how. I assume it's not true, just because stuff never is. So. But yeah, the dog in the microwave. Oh, God, that one is. The whole roommate getting murdered because she didn't turn on the lights, didn't see what was happening. That's another kind of weird one.
Aren't you glad you didn't turn on the lights?
Yeah, so they make a bunch of references too, and they're not really like death or dangerous ones, but like the birth control pills with baby. The radio show gets a lot of call-ins that are also urban legends. So like the birth control pills with baby aspirin, the girl calling in about having to get her stomach pumped after doing certain things with her boyfriend, the people that got stuck together after having sex, like weird stuff like that. And then I think even Wexler's whole class seems to be about urban legends, which is just kind of weird.
That's a blow-off class in college.
Yeah,
right?
that's like, it reminds me a little bit of in Scream 2 where they're having like the film class where they're just ranting about sequels. I was like, this isn't a thing. Like nobody talks about, like this isn't an actual day in a film class. Nobody talks like this. But he does the babysitter and the man upstairs. The phone calls coming from inside the house is referenced here a couple of times. That whole sequence, it happens, but he mentions it in the class, and then that also happens to Michael Rosenbaum's character. The phone call he gets is coming from inside the house. Just they go ham on him. There's probably 15 different urban legends scattered throughout this movie, so they run with it.
Andrew, according to Snopes, that urban legend is false about the scream in Love Roller Coaster. See, this is why we can't have urban legends these days. But I want to read.
Unless Snopes is in on it.
That is a possibility, but Andrew, once I read you with the details of the urban legend, you will wonder why anyone believed this. So the cover of the album that song is from, by the band Ohio Players, it's this woman. She's naked. She's kneeling on some glass, and she's like dripping honey on herself. Okay, so this says it's collected from the internet in 1996. The cover of the album depicts a nude model kneeling atop what appears to be a sheet of glass, dripping honey all over herself from a ladle suspended above her head. The original urban legend was that the glass was actually fiberglass or something other synthetic glass, which reacted chemically with the honey, bonding her skin like superglue to the fiberglass. Freeing her ripped the skin off of her legs, and her career as a model was ruined. So, hang on, we got to get to the scream, right? So she just happens to burst into the recording studio while the Ohio Players are recording Roller Coaster and starts threatening to sue the band for everything they're worth. The band's manager stabs her to death right there in the control booth, And that's the scream you hear in the song. So that's the legend, folks.
People are so dumb.
They are, but honestly,
no.
Okay.
Don't defend this.
Oh, okay.
No,
you're right. You're
here.
right.
There's
you're
nothing
right.
here.
You're right. What it reminds me of is like the Wizard of Oz one, where like you can see someone hang themselves like in the background. I was gonna say I believed that as a kid, but I didn't believe it as a kid. Like it was told to me as an urban legend. Hey, there's this myth about this. Supposedly you see this in Wizard of Oz, but I never believed it.
Me either.
Man, that is funny. People are indeed dumb, Andrew. The dog in the microwave. Like, we don't see it happen. It's implied. We see the aftermath inside the microwave, and the character react to what happened to their dog. I kind of appreciate that the movie goes there. In most movies, what would happen is, the killer's on the phone and they mention the urban legend about the dog in the microwave. The character freaks out and runs to the microwave. You expect him to open it and there's nothing inside.
Right.
And they go, and then the killer jumps out and grabs him. Not this time. They actually do it. It kind of makes me think, all these movies we've talked about this month, one thing they don't do that the first Scream does, and that the Scream sequels never do, they don't go hard on the gore. Like, most movies we talked about are rated R, but mostly for like language stuff. That first Scream movie is very violent and very gory, especially that opening scene, which is also, by the way, another great little short film. But like Drew Barrymore's character's boyfriend, like holding his guts in the chair and her body hanging from the tree, like they go really hard in that first movie in a way that, like, everything that took inspiration from it is like, well, we're not gonna do that. That's one thing that's dropped
right
almost immediately. Even like friend of the show, my wife, not super into horror movies, but when Scream 5 is coming out, I was like, I think you would like this series. Let's check them out. And we watched them all. That first one was a little tougher to get through, especially that opening scene. And then after that, obviously it was fine. But in this movie, all in all, does not go to those extremes. But that in particular, actually,
except that one moment,
killing the dog. Yeah, I mean, they don't. Yeah, again, they don't show it, but they show enough.
It could have not been the dog. It could have been a pound of ground beef. Like it could have been anything.
Could have been a human head.
Which isn't
as sad.
Jesus Christ. Could have been Jared Leto's head. We would all been better for it. No, it's interesting because I actually do think the latter two Scream sequels, 5 and 6, go back a little bit more towards the gore you're talking about. I think that is, but it is interesting that like the sequels seem to go so light on it. And I know that was probably studios being like, we got to expand the audience and all that, whatever. But yeah, this movie there's definitely violence. And there's definitely people getting attacked with axes and stuff, but there's not a whole lot of gore outside that one little clip, which Liz literally skips past when we watch it. Cause she's like, I ain't watching the dog. It's like, I ain't doing that. Nah, that ain't funny. But yeah. That whole sequence is, I will say, I think it's another one that's really well done because it kicks off with him getting the phone call and doing the whole, the call's coming from inside the house. So he's not taking it seriously. This is kind of after he sent Jared Leto packing for thinking that there's actually a killer. He's, Rosenbaum's character kind of throws out the idea that maybe this is Jared Leto is responsible because he wants a big story before he graduates so that he can kind of burst onto the scene. So he's not writing for Martha Stewart or some junk like that. And perfectly fine motivation when you're throwing things around. But so he's kind of dismissive of the whole thing, generally speaking. And so this is kind of the moment where it all comes back around. And I think the sequence is really great of just the phone call to him kind of being like, oh, what are you going to do? It's the man upstairs. And he's like, so he thinks this is the urban legend, is like the man upstairs. Yeah. And he's not taking it seriously because there's a party going on in his house. And then I love the voice on the phone just goes, it's not the man upstairs. It's the dog in the microwave. And like his expression changes and he runs down. Like the whole scene just changes at that point. And he runs down and he's looking at the kitchen and he's there and then you can see these like, and he opens it and you don't really see it. They definitely dress it up. But, and so then he runs to the bathroom and he's like puking because of course you are. And that's where the killer gets him and ties him up and forces him to do the pop rocks with bleach, which turns out kills you. The
pop rocks react to the bleach.
And really cause an issue. And it's I guess it's technically not just bleach. It's some weird cleaning solution, but it's 80% bleach. I do like how this whole sequence unfolds and it's pretty brutal. Like I said, there's not a lot of gore here. It's like, it's just, you're watching this dude basically just ingest this stuff and die. It is, but it still comes off really well. I think it's a very effective sequence. Again, shakes the expectations because, you get the phone call that's coming from inside the house. You're like, that's where we are. And no, it is not. They flip the script, throw us into a completely different spot, and it throws the character off too. Because when it's the call's coming from inside the house, he's confident. He's like, all right, fine. There's a guy in my house, whatever. But with a minute, it becomes about the dog, which he gives the dog like alcohol and stuff throughout this movie. It's really weird. But the minute it's about the dog, he loses it. He's suddenly the guard is down. He's vulnerable and he's not ready for what comes at him. And the killer strikes. And so I think this is another great sequence that just again kind of points again that we're not quite going in the direction you think we're going to go.
I mean, what probably threw him off balance. I mean, like so we see the aftermath in the microwave. He opens it up. There's like it's blood and like meat dripping and like just Andrew. Imagine the smell.
Oh God! Why'd you gotta do that? Why? Why? I was having such a good night. I already had to think about a dog dying, and now it's terrible.
You think about the way a dog dies.
I can't believe you've done this.
It smells like microwave dog in here.
Oh my God! Yeah. Oh man, fantastic.
I love. I love talking about the technology of this era, late 90s, early 2000s. We got to talk about it a little bit last week with the way they had to explain a search engine to us. And I know what you did last summer. In this one, her goth roommate is always on her computer, tying up the phone line, which is something kids today wouldn't understand. But she's always on this website, Goth for Goth. And it's just a chat room for goths at Pendleton University, apparently, because she just asked,
quite the bustling scene, apparently. I guess
looking for a goth out there. What really drove me nuts, I don't know if this is accurate or not. I can't tell if this was like someone trying to write as a young person or if this is actually what the young people were doing at the time. But she's typing. We're on a computer, in a chat room, and she says, "Tell me what room." Capital U, capital R, N. Why would you do that on a keyboard? That is like T9 texting, right? Because it took so long to text on a phone. You did shorthand like that.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Maybe kids were doing that on a computer just to be cool and edgy. I don't know. I don't remember.
I don't know, Chris. We just established we don't have the Riz. I know we're not hip. We're lying if we say we're hip, but. Yeah,
the response to that question is very cool though when it says your room.
Yeah, that again.
Which how did they send that? When I'm thinking about it, did they have like a laptop?
Yeah, they must have. The message is coming from your own computer,
but there's no Wi-Fi, so how were they connected to the chat room?
They just used the other girl. I don't know, Chris. You're watching the movie wrong.
I am.
Let us have our cool moments, but that's another again cool moment. I like it. Brutal ending this character faces. Danielle Harris actually auditioned for the lead role of Natalie. Did not get it, and they kind of brought her in as Tosh instead, the character's name. And yeah, this is pretty brutal what ends up happening here. Just the idea that, because the thing is, though, is that the movie establishes more than once, like she walks in and turns the lights on and she's getting some deep calisthenics with her boyfriend. And just screams, "Turn off the light!" Like, how dare you? Which, then when she comes in and she hears these noises, she's just kind of like, all right, keep the light off. And so it's this, movie appropriately sets it up and then delivers on the execution.
Hey,
what concept.
Andrew, you know what the most bonkers line in this movie is? Towards the
you're not even gonna give me a chance to guess. All right.
You want to guess? You might have it in your notes. Okay. Towards the end, we have Loretta Devine as a security guard. She starts to believe these murders are happening, and she thinks they need to do something about it. And she goes to the dean, and she's asking the dean, "Oh, like something's not adding up here." And what about I think she mentioned Joshua Jackson's character, who they think just went away for the weekend, but in fact he was murdered. Because she mentions they can't find him, and the dean says,
"I know where you're going with this.
It's the weekend. He's probably shacked up in a motel with a girl, or a guy, or a farm animal. Weren't you ever 18?"
Like,
no. She goes, "Not that kind of 18.
I was not."
Insane. And yeah. I mean, like, it goes from or a guy, like the gay implication straight to farm animal is problematic. But then to go to weren't you ever 18, as if this is something all kids do, including myself when I was 18, is what makes it the most bonkers line in the movie.
Yeah, you will never predict where that line ends up when he starts speaking it. Like, you have the trajectory of that statement does not go anywhere that you expect it to.
Yeah, man, I like this movie a lot. Revisiting it, I had no expectations. I didn't expect to not like it or anything, but like I said, I saw it maybe once upon a time, and just had its legacy of being a less than slasher movie. It far surpassed my expectations. I'm so glad that we covered it and I've had a chance to revisit it. And what I like about it, I've talked about like the specifics that I like the killer reveal and the hook, but I like that it's fun. I think a good slasher movie is either scary or fun or a mix of the two, but sometimes you get neither, and that is a bad slasher movie. This one delivers on the fun. It's never taken itself too seriously. We talked about the killer reveal plenty, but the things like the radio and the way that breaks the fourth wall we've already discussed, or when the dean gets killed, ultimately he is run over on the spikes that are in a parking garage that prevent you from going out the entrance.
Yep.
And after his body's impaled on the spikes, the camera pans up to the warning sign that says, warning, severe tire damage. And it's his dead body on the spikes. Just fun little touch. Like, that's just there to make you go, it works. And it does. Like, it's good tone setting. And I think this movie just kind of, it nails that tone. I had a great time.
I agree. I think this movie knows exactly what it is. That's the kind of thing, you people say that as kind of a backhanded thing, but in this case, I agree completely, and I don't think it's that way at all. It's a movie that leans into it. It's got a bit of a meta aspect to it. Like you said, we mentioned all the radio, fourth wall breaking, but it has a hook. It uses it generally pretty effectively, I think. Subverts expectations at the right moments, and like you said, it has a lot of fun with it, which is, it's a weird way to describe a movie where people are getting brutally murdered. But if I'm not enjoying myself while I'm watching it, what am I even doing here?
That's a logical place in this episode, but I just have to shout out that Zoot Suit Riot is in this movie too. The song Zoot Suit Riot, because swing dancing had a revival in the 90s, and Zoot Suit Riot was a big song. It's like when I saw the poster for Valentine and it unlocked this, like, I hadn't thought about that song in years, but as soon as I heard Zoot Suit Riot, throwing back a bottle of beer. Dude, that song. I've got to add that to my 90s playlist.
You and me both, man.
Well, Andrew, so far we've talked about 3 slasher movies from the 90s. Well, I guess Scream 3 was not quite the 90s, but talking about these movies inspired by Scream, it's naturally we're talking about slasher movies starring young people, but next week we're talking about Final Destination, which in my opinion is very clearly inspired by the success of Scream, cashing in on the young hot cast, gets murdered one by one. But is it a slasher movie, Andrew?
Not in the classic sense, no. I mean, I would definitely say it's a horror movie, but it's not a slasher. Not really, no.
No. I guess you have to have a slasher, right? You have to have a killer.
That's typically the criteria.
And does the killer have to be human? I mean, like Child's Play is the spirit of a human, and that's for one clearly.
Well,
a slasher,
I think
right?
a great answer to this, and this is something that Patrick Williams did in one of his videos: is Predator a slasher?
I mean, no, but he makes a very good point for it to be inspired by the popularity of slashers. But I myself would not call it a slasher because, well. Why do I not?
There is
call it
no
a slasher,
definition
Chris?
You're going to make right now for a slasher movie that would not include Predator.
I think a slasher, the killer has to be a human.
Well, then that's the only way Predator isn't. So in that regard, yes. But then that almost eliminates.
I accept your challenge.
But then that eliminates Child's Play because he's not technically.
I don't think so. I mean, he is though. It's a spirit. It's just in a different body.
Is Leprechaun a slasher?
It's honestly, I've never watched a Leprechaun movie. I don't know, Andrew.
They're terrible. But
is it a slasher? What do you say?
Sure, I guess. The bigger point here, Chris, is I don't really care. No, I think saying it needs to be like a human killer, like that's typically like, and I mean,
because like Alien isn't a slasher movie.
You could argue it's a slasher.
You could argue it, but I disagree.
I've seen people argue that it's a haunted house movie, even though the alien is not a ghost. But like, I guess the question is like, it's tough because like I would be like, is Freddy Krueger technically human? Because he is, but he isn't because he's dead.
There has to. I know this is a dumb, vague answer. There has to be a human element to it. Like I know that's not a clear.
But then, like Jason and Michael are just like they could be anything. They're just mindless golems almost. Like there's no personality to them.
Andrew, here it is. To be a slasher,
okay,
the killer has to have been born a human.
All right, fine.
Okay. Well, that settles that. That is not our question of the week. That is just me pondering the definition of slasher. I don't think Final Destination is a slasher, but I do think it is clearly inspired, and we're going to dump into that next week. That is one that I'm very excited to revisit. But for now, it is time for our question of the week. And if you want to ask us a question for a future episode, you can just hop into our Discord. There's a link right there in the show notes. Come and join us and leave a question. Just like this question we have here from, looks like they have a Halloween inspired screen name right now. 12 frames per second reanimated corpse of Mike. They ask, after releasing Before Midnight, his third Before movie, and the Dazed and Confused spiritual successor, Everybody Wants Some, can we officially blame Richard Linklater for the glut of legacy sequels? And look, he goes on to say that, even the movie Boyhood is like a legacy sequel to itself, and just kind of wonders if Hollywood was inspired by this to make all of its legacy movies. And Andrew, the answer to this question is
no.
That's our show for this
Absolutely
week.
not.
Join us next week for Final Destination. No, I I don't think that's the origin of Legacy sequels.
Well, and I don't know that he's saying it's the origin of it as much as it's the success of those is why it started happening so much more often.
I mean, fair enough. I think that is the spirit
I
of his
still
question,
don't agree that is why it happened, because first off, nobody saw Everybody Wants Some. I don't mean to be rude, but it was not. Most people are not aware that movie exists.
Same with the before movies. Like, those don't make money in the box office. But his point does say, did Hollywood look at those and say, what if this, but money, is what he said. So, like, inspired by, but
Hollywood had to notice they were there.
I think Hollywood's only inspired by money. I think you have to have a Legacy sequel make money, and then that causes the influx of Legacy sequels. Now, Andrew, you and I don't even remember if this conversation was on mic, but we've oddly talked about Legacy sequels a lot. How do you define them, as we were just trying to define slasher movies? I think my rough definition is it's a sequel to a movie. There's got to be a long period of time, roughly 10 years or more. That's flexible. You have to have returning characters. And typically those returning characters are not the main character. They are supporting characters to a new young cast. I think you get all those elements together, you got a Legacy sequel. I'm talking Star Wars The Force Awakens, right? I'm thinking
Blade Runner
Indiana Jones. That's a great example of arguably the best of this run of Legacy sequels. Indiana Jones has done it twice now, I think. I think you could count Crystal Skull and Dial of Destiny as Legacy sequels.
Yeah, like we've dived further back with like stuff like Psycho 2, which brings back Anthony Perkins as Norman Bates. Now, to be
which
fair,
you argue is the first Legacy sequel.
Yes, that is my general argument. There are people who argue The Color of Money, which comes out a few years later with Paul Newman and Tom Cruise. Paul Newman is playing the same character he played in a previous film there, but the gap is not as wide, and it comes out after Psycho 2. Now, I would say that the returning cast can't be the main character is a little bit more nebulous, if only because stuff like Top Gun Maverick, Tom Cruise is very clearly still the star of that movie. Indiana Jones, Harrison Ford is very much still the stars of those movies. But like Blade Runner is Ryan Gosling's movie that Harrison Ford appears in.
Okay, so they can be the main character, but you have to have that new blood.
Yeah, there needs to be some kind of new blood. Now, so Everybody Wants Some is... I understand why you would bring it up, because it was sold kind of as like, Dazed and Confused is like high school in the 70s, and Everybody Wants Some was like college in the 80s. That was kind of the... So there was this clear line. Richard Linklater obviously wrote...
So greedy, Richard Linklater. You made the definitive growing up, coming of age, childhood, school experience of the 70s, and you're trying to conquer a whole new decade?
How dare you,
dude?
Leave somebody else some space there. But it isn't actually a sequel to, like, it's just a movie in a similar vein, I think.
Sure,
so I don't really think anybody looked at Everybody Wants Some and was like, oh yeah, like this is, especially since Everybody Wants Some. You can just stop
there. I don't think anybody looked at Everybody Wants Some, and you can just stop your sentence there.
It cost $10 million. It cost $10 million and made $5 million. So it was very critically acclaimed. Like most of Richard Linklater's things are, he makes very few movies that don't typically have good critical reception. But that one was not a hit. Now, to be fair, he says, did they look at that and say this but money? And the Before trilogy has a lot more success. Like those movies usually gross in the 20 millions. So, I mean, there is people going to see those, and there is some interest there. But I just don't see those as being the crux of why studios were suddenly like, let's bring back all the old stuff.
I don't think those are Legacy sequels, because all they have is a long gap between movies, but it's the same two stars, it's the same main characters. So I do not consider those Legacy sequels. Like I think the new blood aspect, new characters, new cast
piece of it.
is a key piece of it. I think it has to do with it's just money. Like, this sounds cynical, but it's the way it works. Studios trying to wring everything they can out of an IP. And honestly, tied into this month, Scream has kind of nailed it because Scream 4 was all about reboots and Scream 5 is about legacy sequels, both about what's in vogue at the time and both just ways to continue to wring money out of your franchises and IPs. You had a reboot remake phase, and then you had the legacy sequel phase. Well, what if we just bring those characters back? Ghostbusters, another example. Go ahead, Andrew.
Anyway, I actually am going to point to a single thing that I think if you're going to blame anything for the glut of legacy sequels, I'm going to say this, and it's probably going to be controversial. I'm going to point to Stranger Things as why legacy sequels became in vogue. Because Stranger Things, okay. You smell what I'm stepping in here?
I'm seeing. I don't want to take your credit. I'm going to let you.
Stranger Things is a new IP. It is technically something new, but it is littered with nostalgia for things from before. Not just in casting. Winona Ryder's here. Beetlejuice, Heathers, whatever. You've got Sean Astin showing up in later seasons from Goonies, things like this. You've got Robert Englund in later seasons. You've got all of these pieces, but not just do you have these actors coming in, you have a show set in the 80s that is a love letter to the 80s that doesn't just focus on the film and television of the 80s. It focuses on everything else, just, food, snacks, television shows that are airing, all these things. It created this, everybody loves it, and I like it well enough. Don't misunderstand me. Like, I'm excited to see where the series kind of finally goes, but it really fostered this sense of nostalgia for the 80s. Specifically, these things. The Duffer Brothers were making a show that was very much a love letter to the things they enjoyed as kids. But I think but what happened more so is it was insanely successful. Now, I think it is not out of the question at all for a studio to look at something like Stranger Things and be like, and have the lesson be, bring those things back. I think if there is a single thing I would kind of want to point at, it would be the nostalgia brought back by Stranger Things. I think that is a huge factor. Probably not the sole factor, as with all things, there's no just one thing. But I think that sense of nostalgia for the past, kind of told studios that were kind of like, oh, everybody liked in Stranger Things when the kids dressed as Ghostbusters. Why don't we do another Ghostbusters movie? You end up in situations like that. And then obviously actors and crew were kind of like, well, let's do, Tom Cruise is like, fine, we'll do Top Gun Maverick, and makes one of the greatest action movies of all time. And, well, I'm going to call that an action movie, but not in the sense that like Die Hard's an action movie, but like it became this trend where it suddenly was like what was old was new again. And I think that sense of nostalgia is how you get to that mindset. And I think Stranger Things is the one thing that I would point at as far as fostering that nostalgia and making it sit in the forefront of people's minds.
Andrew, I think that is a great take. I agree with almost everything you're saying here. The one adjustment I would make is that Stranger Things wasn't the impetus, but it was the crest of a wave that was already bubbling up. And the name of that wave is J.J. Abrams, because The Force Awakens comes out 1 year before Stranger Things. But even before that, in 2011, he makes the movie Super 8, which is actually kind of a hit. I wanted to look at the box office. It made $260 at the box office on a $50 million budget. Pretty good hit. And that movie is just so clearly inspired by Steven Spielberg blockbusters of the 80s and 90s. I think that puts that 80s nostalgia sort of into the air. And obviously Force Awakens is an early example of a very high budget legacy sequel with a returning cast that is a huge hit. And then Stranger Things is like the peak of this wave. It then explodes into all these movies that we've named a bunch of examples of already. what's interesting here is, where does Tron Legacy fit into all this?
That was what I was just about to say, because, if you're looking for the birth of the term legacy in relation to this, now,
do you genuinely think that's where that played a part in the term legacy sequel? Because no one called Psycho 2 a legacy sequel.
No, because it wasn't a concept then. The idea of
right,
the idea of what a legacy sequel is, we are retroactively applying it to Psycho 2. That is 100% true. Now, I think Tron Legacy is definitely a test run, whereas they took a swing. And obviously Tron was something that people had a lot of nostalgia for. But I don't think that crest of the 80s wave had really come to pass yet. And that might be kind of why the movie wasn't super successful. Because for a lot of people, a Tron sequel seemed kind of out of nowhere at the time. Now, I love Tron Legacy. I absolutely do. And Legacy is just an easy term for there was a pro wrestling faction called Legacy that was just 3 second-generation wrestlers. I mean, it's not uncommon to just go back and be like, oh, Legacy is an easy thing. Because Legacy obviously is implying, like you said, those new characters. But Tron Legacy is a legacy sequel. It fits all the boxes that we have described. But I think you definitely have some attempts there. Like Rocky Balboa, technically a legacy sequel? Or would you say Creed's more the legacy sequel?
Creed
definitely
Creed has the new blood. Creed's the returning characters
Rocky
with
Balboa,
the new blood.
I mean, Rocky Balboa has his kid, but that's not...
that character, that's not a new character, though.
Yeah, but as an adult, he can become something more than he was before.
I say Creed is the legacy sequel.
Yeah, that's fine. So, I mean, it's an interesting... Jurassic World is something that probably needs to be mentioned in this too. With Jurassic, because I think the first Jurassic World is even before Force Awakens. Jurassic World is 2015. When's Force Awakens?
Same year.
So
it's months before.
Yeah. So, I mean, you're definitely looking at a driving nostalgia and...
Yeah, and then Independence Day was right after that. It's 2016, I think.
Yeah, there was an Independence Day legacy sequel for some reason. That was the one that always, even now, just kind of gives me pause. I was just like, is this where we are as a people? Then obviously, the horror legacy sequels started. We had Halloween. We had Candyman. We have even more supposedly in the works.
Is Candyman a legacy sequel? I thought it was a remake.
New one. There's Threads.
I need to watch it.
It's very good. I like it a lot. It is. What was it? Even just the most recent Exorcist Believer, another legacy sequel. But I think Stranger Things being the crest of that wave, that what is old is new. That's definitely the thing that comes to my brain as kind of the biggest moment where I think corporations really were like, let's go all in on nostalgia. And I think that nostalgia wave, I would honestly, I don't mean to completely dismiss the question, but I would not ever associate anything that Linklater has done with why studios were like, it's all about legacy sequels, folks, because the Before trilogy it's successful. There's a reason they were able to do 3 of them, but it's not like if I went to my parents and I was like, hey, have you seen the Before trilogy? They would be like, what? And it would be even less so for Everybody Wants Some. There's a conversation about those existing in that space probably, but I would never point to them as like the impetus for any of that, for being the motivation for studios to be like, oh man. It's probably Stranger Things, and then honestly, the success of Force Awakens is probably what really drove it home. That was the one where studios really were like, all right, old is new. And but there was that, like you said, as you got into the 2010s, that kind of nostalgia for the 80s definitely started peaking. And even television shows like the Goldbergs and stuff like that, they just exist in that space you know, the old South Park joke, the Memba berries, memba this, memba that, and like that became like a whole genre unto itself. That was basically like, you remember when things were cool in the 80s, and it was like, I guess, yeah. You know, that became a whole genre, and it's because that's the thing I think is missing from something like pointing to the Before trilogy or Everybody Wants Some, is like the Before trilogy has definitely got nothing to do with nostalgia. Like there's no nostalgia in the Before trilogy. Like that's just not what that story is. Like the third installment of that was not like, remember this other time. And
I just love that we've spent about 60% of our time. We spent about 40% of the time answering his question and 60% of the time pointing out how wrong his setup for the question was.
But like with Everybody Wants Some, you could say there's nostalgia involved in that, was my point. But it's lacking the direct connection. Whereas like I think like spiritual sequels are not really something that big studios really kind of work in. The biggest thing I can, you know, Superman Returns, is that technically a legacy sequel? It's that one's weird because like it wants to be a legacy
returning
sequel.
Characters, but not returning cast members. But like, even the returning characters thing is well, we talked about it on that episode.
Yeah,
Andrew, I think we've answered this question. I think we Psycho 2. Everything's inspired by Psycho 2. That was our conclusion. What do you think is the first legacy sequel? Do you honestly? Not God. These are the dumb things I could talk about all day, Andrew. Psycho 2, I think, is the legacy sequel is what Black Christmas is to slashers. You could argue it's maybe the first, but there's something missing there, where Halloween is the true first slasher because it makes a character out of the slasher. Mm-hmm. Because Psycho 2, I don't think has the returning character amongst new blood aspect down. It's just a long gap with a returning character. I think it's not quite all the pieces there. I think it's like a grandfather of the legacy sequel. But this is I don't know. What do you think? Do you think Psycho 2 is the first legacy sequel? Do you point to something else? Do you think it's 80s nostalgia that inspired this? What is the best legacy sequel? Andrew, for your money, I know it's Blade Runner 20. What's the year of that? 29?
2049.
2049. I might be inclined to agree with you, but if you've got a different answer, let us know. Hit us up in that Discord that I talked about earlier. And until next week, until Final Destination, just remember that maybe not every movie is great,
but all movies have greatness.
Thank you to Mark Benavides for singing our theme song. You can check him out on Instagram at NotThatMarkAnthony. And thanks to Mitch for the music. You can follow him on Twitter at I'm a Biggie Boy, and check our show notes for the SoundCloud link. Check out our store on TeePublic for some Best of the Rest merch. And if you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend. That is the only way that we grow. And follow us on social media at BOTRcast. Thank you. I ate too much dinner. I'm too full.
I had no dinner, so I ate a shit ton of melon. And I ate too much melon.
Melon?
Melon, like cantaloupe.
Why don't you say cantaloupe? Melon is not specific enough.
What other melon would it be?
Watermelon? Honeydew melon?
Who eats a honeydew?
There's a lot of different kinds of...
No one eats a honeydew on purpose. When's the last time you bought a honeydew with the intention of eating a honeydew?
To be fair, I've probably never bought a cantaloupe either.
Exactly.
In my life, but
that's what I thought.
But you have. Anyway, when you go to like a salad bar, usually it's like they're mixed together, honeydew and cantaloupe. And it's... I don't know, it's just terrible. Weird that you call it a specific melon, just melon, instead of by its name. It's weird, Andrew.
All right. You're probably right.